Now, the FBI referred to it as an ongoing and rapidly evolving investigation, but they said they do not believe he acted alone. They said they believe the attacker was not solely responsible for this act. They are asking the public, anyone who had any interaction with him, to come forward, anyone who knows who his known associates might have been, and they are on the hunt for those potential individuals. Officials are also delaying tomorrow's Sugar Bowl by 24 hours. Now, that's the first time that's happened since Hurricane Katrina. Louisiana Senator Kennedy said he thinks that's a good idea because, quote, there's just too much they don't know. All right, back with us now. We've got Ken Dilanian, Frank Figliuzzi, Jim Kavanaugh, and Christopher O'Leary. Chris, I want to start with you. We were talking just before the press conference about the potential of known associates, a wider network. Listening to all that, what do you think law enforcement is pursuing? How do they find known associates, and what do you expect them to find?
Well, I think there's two things that they're concentrating on likely now. Number one, the truck, any information that can be pulled out of that truck. Did he leave a cell phone behind? That'll be exploited. What other digital dust, what a digital footprint does he have, and who it points them to? And then physical locations. The Airbnb that he was staying in New Orleans, his previous residence back in Texas, and trying to illuminate his network and who else was on a platform with him that radicalized him, who else was susceptible to that radicalization or sympathetic to it, and who else might have mobilized in support of this. Other things are, you know, the devices that he used. Yes, he rented the truck and he used that as his primary weapon, but how did he make these devices? Did he have the technical knowledge himself, or did somebody help him?
Where he got the components?
Where did he procure the precursors and the components from? How sophisticated were the devices? So that'll tell you something about whether he acted alone or not, if he had expert advice. And then with the firearm, did he legally purchase it? Where did he train? Who trained with him? And that'll all come out from different interviews and interrogations, from video surveillance to this digital footprint that he has. All of that will start painting a picture and illuminating a network. The most important part is to find out who the potential co-conspirators are, find out if there's an ongoing threat, and get them in pocket, get physical and technical surveillance on them as quickly as possible.
And law enforcement officials there were a bit circumspect about how they knew or why they thought he had associates. They said they didn't want to mention anything that might compromise their potential investigation. Ken, I want to ask you, they also mentioned that 2 improvised explosive devices were found around the French Quarter and, quote, neutralized, and they are still looking to see if there are others. What does that tell you, and how does law enforcement proceed to make sure that area is safe, especially given the number of people that are in town for this game that's now been delayed 24 hours?
Yeah, it's pretty alarming. It tells you that, well, exactly what they said, which is they have been canvassing the area all day looking for any suspicious package, and they believe they've got them all. But you heard the FBI agent appeal to the public to make sure they hadn't missed anything. And it suggests that this was a very complex attack. It wasn't just a vehicle attack. Again, it was an attack with a weapon, with a gun, and also with IEDs. And so multiple prongs here, which is something more complex than we've seen before in these ISIS-inspired vehicle attacks. Also, going back to this question of co-conspirators, that was a bit perplexing to me. It's unclear whether they don't know the identities of these people, or they do know and they just don't want to share them. They don't want to hint that they're onto these people. But oftentimes, when the FBI is trying to find people, they share what information they have with the public to sort of inspire tips and information coming in. In this case, they haven't done that. You said they were very circumspect. That's one way to put it. Several times during the news conference, they said, we're going after, we're going to get these people. We've got some bad people we need to run down. But they didn't tell us anything about who these people might be, where they might be, what their roles were in this alleged conspiracy. So that was pretty remarkable to me, and it raises a lot of questions. I'd be interested in what Chris and Frank, both former FBI officials, think is going on there.
Frank, what do you think is going on there? What's your take on that and the fact that you heard a lot of emotionally charged language, multiple officials referring to it as an evil act, an evil individual, but not a lot of details there about where they're going with this investigation?
Yeah, I was carefully trying to assess every word that came out of the mouth of the FBI Assistant Special Agent in charge there, and it is very interesting. One of the notes I took was, quote, a range of associates, is what she said in response to a reporter's question about how many, who are you looking at? A range of associates. Wow. So they know there's multiple. associates. They know that perhaps they're within a certain universe of people that this suspect has associated with. One of the great concerns I have, and some of it came from Senator Kennedy's interesting language, implying that he knows things, right? That you're going to get the truth about who did this and who. The worst case scenario for federal agents is to actually have somebody in your files that you've been looking at and that acts out violently, and you don't have a chance to stop them or him. So one possibility, and I emphasize this is just a possibility, is that somehow somebody was on the FBI's radar screen or some agency's radar screen, and that may have helped jump to the FBI saying, look, we've got this. We'll take the lead on this. Now, it could just be the ISIS flag, but to hear the FBI representative for New Orleans saying, range of associates, we don't think he acted alone, he's not solely responsible, and to say that with great confidence indicates there is some knowledge there and what is it that leads them to that conclusion? Something in his devices already? Not likely. Something in his computer at home? Something that the FBI files indicate? I don't know, but this does say we now know why the Sugar Bowl is being delayed. They're not ready to say they've wrapped this up yet, and that's troubling.
And of course, we don't have any official confirmation that he was known to law enforcement, at least not yet. Jim, I want to turn to you now because, you worked on the Unabomber case, you worked the Atlantic Olympics bombings, and one thing that really stood out to me is they said Bourbon Street is now an active crime scene. And this is a huge area. There's a lot of people in town, and it seemed unclear when that will lift. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you manage and go through a crime scene of that size? What is the protocol here?
Well, they're going to take all the bomb technicians and agents from FBI and ATF and the state police, and they're going to sweep that for, IEDs and suspicious packages. And a lot of that's already been done. It's pretty routine. And they'll bring the bomb-sniffing dogs out, and, if there's anything suspicious, they'll secure it. So they're going to be able to secure Bourbon Street and the blocks around it. They probably already have done most of that. I don't think that's going to be a big problem. I think, like Frank's saying, the reason that they're not giving more is I just think their information on the contacts of the killer are just rudimentary and preliminary. I mean, I just don't think they have it deep. In other words, they're not calling us, telling us that they have co-conspirators or aiding people who've aided and abetted identified. They're not giving us a photograph or looking for this person. I think they just have associates, contacts who may be like-minded, and they're wondering and investigating whether this could be people who aided him, conspired with him, and they just don't have enough information yet. I think one of the key things here is the attacks at 3:15 a.m., we have bombs placed in the French Quarter, according to the FBI. Well, did he reconnoiter the Bourbon Street at midnight or somewhere like that, walk around and plant some devices, and then come back and, stick his ISIS flag on the truck and come in and drive through on the sidewalk, which I thought was a wholly inadequate description of the security there. The governor seemed to be the one who would accept responsibility that, whatever's done wrong will correct. But, proselytizing that, we have the greatest security anywhere, it's got to ring hollow with the families of all these deceased people and injured people when a terrorist can come through and drive on a sidewalk. How can that ever be an acceptable outcome?
Right.
How can that ever be acceptable? It's not acceptable. And it doesn't sound very well. It sounds like everybody's saying we have the greatest security, and it's pretty obvious you don't. So, that sort of rang hollow for me. I just kept thinking about the families listening to that. I mean, it just doesn't sound good at all. I do think they're smart to postpone it, and the reason, terrorism is theater, and it's a magnet. Big events are a magnet. Bourbon Street, New Year's Eve's a magnet. Can you imagine the attraction of striking New Orleans again at the Sugar Bowl? What a magnet that is for terrorists. And listen, they know that. They're watching everywhere. So they really do have to bolster security. And all the discussion on bollards is meaningless. Meaningless discussion. You should have put the dump trucks there loaded with sand. there's no excuse for not having that street blocked on all ends for New Year's Eve.